Hey everybody, welcome back. We are continuing on with Heidegger, reading the question concerning technology. We left off on page, if I'm not mistaken, page 322. We were talking about the conversion of basically everything into standing reserve or Bestand. And now we're going to talk um, about a few things. One in particular is going to be the notion of in-framing, another sort of key term of this text. Heidegger uses the word Gestell in German, and we'll unpack that in just a moment. And then we're going to look at a few passages along the way that I think are sort of helpful, and then we'll spend a little bit of time at the end of the work, sort of showing. So not only does Heidegger sort of give us an analysis, he's going to give us at least not a solution, but he's going to sort of strongly suggest a way forward to deal with the problems of in-framing and standing reserve, the sort of problems of modern technology. So we're going to start on page 324, and we're starting in the second paragraph. And if you drop down a few lines into that second paragraph, he says, wherever man, people, opens his eyes and ears, unlocks his heart, and gives himself over to meditating and striving, shaping and working, entreating and thanking, he finds himself everywhere already brought into the unconcealed. I wanted to read that and a couple of other passages that really, while they may not seem to speak directly to the issue of the phenomenon of technology, it speaks to Heidegger having a view of humanity as one in which we lose ourselves in a whole array of inauthentic activities, and in which we assume certain metrics that quantitatively measure the value, that sort of weigh the value of particular activities, particular commodities, particular things that we want to do or to experience or whatever. And Heidegger wants to return to a much more original way of being, of living. And he's using these terms of meditating, so like a slow type of thinking. It's not that calculative thinking that's just only understood in terms of measurable results. Striving, shaping, working, entreating, and thanking. That if we can have this sort of gracious, this if we can have this sort of gratitude for our own existence, going back to the notions of indebtedness that we talked about, reframing of the way that we understand how things come into being and their sort of co-responsibility with their various causes. That if we sort of simplify and sort of, if I can put it as returning to the basics, that this is going to allow us to, as he says here, find ourselves everywhere already brought into the unconcealed. And if you remember, when we talk about the unconcealed, this is some of that Heidegger's phenomenological language of talking about the truth. What is revealed, what is unconcealed. That the simplifying of life down to what it is that we really sort of need, and not what it is that we falsely believe that we need. That these basic ingredients of a human life that is productive and connected, those sorts of things, that type of thinking, those types of activities, that sort of mental, emotional comportment towards life, that's what allows us to enter into something like the truth. And again, this isn't a dogmatic claim about like a religious claim about what the truth is, or some sort of metaphysical claim, like philosophical assertion of like, and here's truth with a capital T. That he means that this is like allowing things to really be what they are, and to be at some sort of you know, equilibrium or harmonious relationship with the way that things really are, and not dogmatic, ideological, um, you know, illusions or confusions about the way things are. Okay, so um, the next thing that I mentioned at the beginning of the video is we're moving from him talking about how everything is converted into standing reserve, right? Um, and we talked a little bit about what that means. And now we're moving to Gestalt, this sort of other really big takeaway from this work. It's at the bottom of page 324. He says, we now name the challenging claim that gathers man with a view to ordering the self-revealing as standing reserve, Gestalt, in framing. He says at the top of 325, we dare to use this word in a sense that has been thoroughly unfamiliar up to now. Heidegger is really well known for reclaiming old words, using words in different ways, creating his own sort of variations of words. And, he's not the only philosopher to do this, but he is particularly well known or notorious for doing that. According to ordinary usage, the word Gestell or frame means some kind of apparatus, like a book rack. Gestell is also the name for a skeleton, and the employment of the word Gestell in framing that is now required of us seems equally eerie, not to speak of the arbitrariness with which words of a mature language are so misused. Meaning something when a language has been around for a while, we sometimes forget what the words that we use actually signify, within this language group, if it's an old language. And so there's often a misuse of language because our knowledge of its origin, we become lazy or forgetful or apathetic towards sort of the integrity of words, and we just sort of use them in very casual, popular, not particularly thoughtful ways. And so Heidegger obviously pays a lot of attention to words and where they come from and what they originally meant. And so here Heidegger is using this term Gestell, and what Gestell is if the world is going to be converted into standing reserve, and that's, again, for simplicity's sake, that's like energy on demand, right? Everything's converted into something that's usable. It's been challenged and ordered and converted, and now it's distributed and it's just standing by. And this is everything, right? We can think of it in the easiest terms of like energy that is supplied, through the power company or whatever. But it's really everything that we're sort of accessing. I mentioned like the grocery store example. Just everything is converted as some form of commodity, to varying degrees of a sort of universal distribution and variation. And then in framing is the sort of process, through which we are now viewing the world and then using it through in framing that then has this standing reserve effect. To use the sort of language that he's dusting off here, to inframe the world and to see it through this frame, it's a skeletonizing of the world. It's stripping it of all of its sensuous, spiritual, possibility of awe and mystery, and everything's just sort of reduced down to some basic argument or some basic material that is of some sort of immediate use to us. And so things sort of can't be rich and dimensional. Think of like a human body to play up this sort of comparison. You need a skeleton for sure, but sort of on top of that skeleton and within that skeleton, you have the different sort of sinews and muscles and organs and the flow of blood and all of this really other materials and mechanisms and relationships that sort of have to exist to have a full functioning human body and life. And so this view of inframing that is a way that we see is also, it's a process. It's not just an optic, right? It's also a process of engagement, a process of use that then takes this dimensional world, and so then we see through this inframing, and it converts the world into the sort of bare elements. And this isn't the simplicity of the sort of frugality of thought, the simplicity of spirit, the thankfulness of a meditative way of life that we just read on previously. This is rather the sort of reduction of everything to its most efficient and most useful in a sort of exacting and challenging way. And of course, this results in all sorts of problems for us as beings who want to be fully dimensional beings. And we don't want to be reduced to mere resources. And we don't want the world, I assume, to be seen as merely an opportunity to sort of profit or use or anything else like that. It diminishes our possibility of having powerful relationship, with the earth, with the world, and with others. And it also has a profound impact upon us. If you'll go to page 327, and I'm going to try to flesh out this a little bit before we get to the sort of Heidegger's suggestion for what to do about this, although I've hinted at it earlier in previous videos. On page 327, in the middle paragraph, halfway into it, he says, "That which is primally early shows itself only ultimately to men, to people. Therefore, in the realm of thinking, a painstaking effort to think through still more primally what was primally thought is not the absurd wish to revive what's past, but rather the sober readiness to be astounded before the coming of the dawn." Now, I know that Heidegger's language is a bit difficult for us, but what I think is important here is that Heidegger's saying what comes most primally or most originally, what comes earliest, is only known to us later. Like we don't always know it, in its origin, and it only comes to us through a painstaking effort, and in the realm of thinking. And if Heidegger's right, then we're really not thinking anymore. If we're merely just calculating. And if you're still not sure what that means, I mean, I'll take another sort of stab at it. If you're asked to read a poem or to look at a work of art, or to read a sort of philosophical argument, or to read a story, a short story or novel or something like that, and then afterwards you said, okay, hey, take a little while, think about it, and then I want you to tell me, what it means. What are the implications? What's going on here in any sort of significant, remarkable, or important, regard. And if you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about, right? That there is a whole realm of thinking and a whole host of disciplines and traditions and human activities that we're not even well situated to regard. And I'm making a generalization about society. Maybe some of you identify with more than others. And Heidegger really wants us to sort of reconsider this other mode of thinking, the meditative, the patient, the slowly reflective, that allows us access to these various modes of human activity, these various sort of insights that types of philosophy, types of art can provide. He says, therefore, in the realm of thinking, a painstaking effort to think through still more primally what was primally thought, what was originally thought, is not the absurd wish to revive the past. Like we can't go back to the ancient Greeks, right? We can't go back in time and sort of think with them, except when we read, except when we think, right? He says, rather the sober readiness to be astounded before the coming of the dawn. Something like, the future's coming, right? There is a destiny for the world. And it is bound up with a technical rationality. It is bound up with technology, modern technology, not just technology as such. And what Heidegger, is saying, just like you go back to the beginning of this work and talked about, how we're not free. We're not ready. We're not ready for the implications of a world in which technology is playing such a profound, completely saturating, enmeshed role in our lives with almost everything that we do, and that its impact on us is something that we're not prepared for. We'll keep sort of dealing with it as issues come up. We'll keep trying to find ways to sort of, get it in hand and master it. But if we're not prepared to cultivate an inner life, a relationship to the world, modes of thinking, to see technology for what it is and for what it's revealing to us about itself, about us, that we're not going to be ready for that future, and it's going to have devastating, if it hasn't already taken effect, if it hasn't already happened, if it's already too late. The sorts of creatures that it turns us into, and whatever is recognizably human about us, will be lost. And we don't have to engage in some sort of fantastic science fiction novel to imagine what this necessarily means. I mean, it could be much more banal. It could be much more, ordinary and not so sensational in its impact. It could just be the erosion of people becoming unfamiliar with themselves, and becoming disengaged and apathetic or reactionary, or it could have a whole host of possibilities of what it means, in addition to the actual destruction of the things that we need to survive. That's a possibility. Okay, so let's go to page 330, and I'm going to read what I think is a difficult passage, but I think it might be helpful to sort of try to unpack it a little bit. So on page 330, it's the middle paragraph. It says, "Freedom governs the free space in the sense of the cleared, that is to say, the revealed. To the occurrence of revealing, truth, freedom stands in the closest and most intimate kinship. All revealing belongs within a harboring and a concealing, but that which frees, the mystery, is concealed and always concealing itself. All revealing comes out of the free, it goes into the free, and brings into the free. The freedom of the free consists neither in unfettered arbitrariness nor in the constraint of mere laws. Freedom is that which conceals in a way that opens to light, in whose clearing shimmers the veil that hides the essential occurrence of all truth and lets the veil appear as what veils. Freedom is the realm of the destining that at any given time starts a revealing on its way." Now, I don't think that I can unpack all of that, in this video, but I want to at least give you a sense of it. So there's some sort of relationship between freedom and truth, and mystery, and this notion of veiling, unveiling, or closure and disclosure, something like that. And I think that what Heidegger is getting at here might be helpful to recall the scene from the Odyssey, in which Odysseus is in disguise, and he's sort of not letting people know who he is, and then there's a song that's being sung about him, and then the king is sitting next to Odysseus, and when the song starts, as it recounts the various things that Odysseus has been through, it makes him want to cry, but he doesn't want anyone to see him crying, and so he takes the hem of his cloak and he hides his crying so that people won't know that it's him. But the one next to him, near him in many ways, who sees him, notices the act of him hiding, the act of him concealing, covering up his crying. And so the point here is that that act of hiding, that act of veiling, right, alerts those who are paying attention. And so what is disclosed is very much related to the action, the phenomenon of hiding it. And so concealment and unconcealment belong together. That for Heidegger, truth is always sort of like nature itself, it's sort of always concealing its essence, right? It's always sort of withdrawing from us. But if we're paying attention, we notice its withdrawal. We notice its attempt to hide, as it were, and so that means that we can follow the trace of it. That means that we can know the truth in its hiding. We can know nature. We can know the essence of technology as it attempts to hide itself from us. And so when he says freedom is that which conceals in a way that opens to light, in whose clearing shimmers the veil that hides the essential occurrence of all truth and lets the veil appear as what veils. So freedom, freedom is something like that which participates in the hiding of truth, um, in that it is related to our own desire to know it without actually being able to lay claim to it as a particular thing. That it's much more about allowing things to be sort of what they are. That's perhaps um, the best way to think about freedom from a Heideggerian perspective, is that it is not an assertion of particular types of socio-political liberties. I mean, those are obviously legitimate as well, but it's a sort of manner of thinking that is genuinely interested in knowing what things really are, but not so much as to confine them to dogmatic assertions of being A, B, or C, but rather can participate in their withdrawing from us. And that might sound a little too difficult to follow, but the basic idea is that you question things and you follow wherever it leads. Not that you necessarily wind up at some place that you assume that you're going to wind up. You might follow all the questions and find that it just leads you to a place, a sort of open place of thinking where all the questions are magnified. The stakes are higher. The possibilities of what things can mean are greater than you imagined. But that you freely followed. That you freely followed. As a thinker, as one who asked questions, and got to this place. And then, now the truth of, I'll say the way things are. And it's not reduced to an argument. Now, this is how I hope this is helpful in as much as where Heidegger's taking us, and again, I've already mentioned it a few times, is that we see this type of questioning activity, interpretive activity, as related to, I think, what's going on with his thoughts about freedom here, related to art, and that is you can follow art, you can inquire after it, you can think on it, you can ponder it, and it doesn't result in a logical argument. It doesn't result in a formula. It results in a variety of possibilities of meaning, and that they can definitely vary from person to person. Or that particular artwork, contain various expressions, various disclosures of truth, of different phenomena, of different things that human beings experience, and that they are putting it forward in such a way that they're not reducible. They're not reducible, and they're inexhaustible. And that's why you go to a museum and there can be works there that are hundreds of years old, if not older. And that their ability to sort of, I'll say something like speak the truth, endures, right? Like a really good book. You can read The Republic thousands of years after it was written, and you can still go there and find things, and you can find new things. There's no final reading that gets it all done, and now everything's known. The great works are ones that are continually, through their beauty, through their power, through their various modes of expression, are giving us truths to follow, to question after, to ponder. We see on page 331, he says at the bottom of the page, In a similar way, the unconcealment in accordance with which nature presents itself as a calculable complex of the effects of forces can indeed permit correct terminations, but precisely through these successes, the dangers may remain that in the midst of all that is correct, the true will withdraw. That if we only live in a world where we understand things as correct or incorrect, black or white, right or wrong, if everything is, reduced to that cause, effect, whatever it is, these unhelpful reductions, or maybe they're really helpful, but not in the way that we think that they are, not, and the consequences of such reductions end up having such a negative developmental impact on us, that in such a world in which everything is sort of being enframed and everything's being converted into something useful and efficient, that in the midst of all that is correct, the true will withdraw, and we have no possibility of ascertaining the truth of anything, unless, of course, we're going to conflate the true with the correct, which he's already talked a bit about. If you look up just above that, in the paragraph above it, in the middle of it, he says, "Thus, where everything that presents as exhibits itself in the light of cause-effect coherence, even God, for representational thinking, veritas, not aletheia, can lose all that is exalted and holy. The mysteriousness of his distance, in the light of causality, God can sink to the level of a causa efficiens. He then becomes, even in theology, the God of the philosophers, namely, of those who define the unconcealed and the concealed in terms of the causality of making, without ever considering the essential providence of this causality." Meaning, basically, like, even God as the sort of ultimate, symbol of mysteriousnness, of truth, is reduced to a type of thinking in which we really only understand God as an efficient cause, the sort of creator or maker or whatever. And this God of the philosophers, this God of logical argumentation, is stripped of anything that makes it a God worthy of awe or relationship. Let's look now on page 332, right in the middle of the page. It's italicized. He says, "In truth, however, precisely nowhere does man today any longer encounter himself in his essence." And this is, so as he's going through this he's developing this interpretation, this argument, if you will, about what modern technology is and what it's turning everything into, is that one of the ways to view the cost that it's having on us is that we never encounter ourselves. I mean, it basically makes it impossible for us to be introspective or to be people who are reflective. That slow type of thinking, the engaging our own thoughts, is something that's prohibited to us. We're basically blocked. That the poetic possibilities of thought are something that we don't know about, and we don't know how to do it. And this is, of course, because modern technology, he's going to argue, here in the next few pages, itself blocks poiesis. It blocks its own poetic origin. So Heidegger is going to, on page 333, he's going to introduce some lines from the poet Hölderlin, where he says, "But where danger is, grows the saving power also." This is going to be how he views modern technology as what we can call a pharmakon, right? We get this from the Greeks. And Plato talks about written language as a pharmakon in his work at the end of his dialogue, Phaedrus, and that is that it's really wonderful, right? Written language gives us the possibility of writing down, not recording knowledge, recording events, doing all these really wonderful things, right? It's like a form of salvation. Yet, as is pointed out in the dialogue, it has all sorts of consequences. It makes people less prone to want to memorize things. It leaves open the possibility of misinterpreting what's written. Um, that it's not simply something that's just a net positive. And it's like other pharmaceuticals, right? Other pharmacons. Medicine is good, right? But if you take the wrong medicine, right, it can make you sick and it might kill you. So that there are certain things that have a sort of pharmacological nature. They have the possibility to save or heal and also to kill. And this is what modern technology he's saying. I think he's saying, like, both environmentally, but also sort of, spiritually, if you will. Modern technology is something that has the possibility to liberate. I mean, think of what we can do. Think of what we've already done. Think of the number of people that we can feed. Think of the type of like operations that we can conduct. Um, think of everything that we can sort of do, but also think about the fact that we've systematically exterminated people and we've dropped bombs. this It's not as though progress in technology is just a net good. It's a double-edged sword, and it's one that if we continue on the path that we are, and we don't change anything about ourselves, there's no reason to believe that technology isn't going to sort of bring all of the terrible things with it that it possibly can. It's going to take more than us just hoping and wishing that it all turns out all right. He says on page 335, at the bottom of that first paragraph, the revealing the challenges has its origin as a destining and bringing forth, but at the same time, in-framing in a way characteristic of a destining blocks poiesis. I just wanted to, show you, one of the places where he says this specifically, that modern technology as a challenging, as that which in-frames, as that which, it is a way of thinking about everything being converted in the way that it is into standing reserve. The poetic nature, the bringing forth, the showing, the creating, blocks that. It blocks it, I would argue, it blocks it within us. It ultimately does so by us becoming disinterested in it. I mean, a particular symptom of it would be something like we're no longer interested in poetry. We're no longer interested in art. We're no longer interested in any of those historic activities. Again, I'm painting with a big brush here, but that would be like a particular symptom. Much more generally or phenomenologically, this would just mean that our own poetic capabilities, whether expressed through meditative art or meditative activity, or the creative arts, the fine arts, whatever, however it might express itself, that this is something that when everything is sort of fed to us and we just consume and we just calculate and when we just are just obsessed with efficiency and amusement, whatever there is that's poetic and beautiful about the world will be something that we don't see, something that we don't engage, something we don't participate in. Saying all that, I want to get to the last couple of pages. On page 339, last couple of paragraphs, he says, at the outset of the destining of the West in Greece, the arts soared to the supreme height of the revealing granted them. They illuminated the presence of the gods and the dialogue of divine and human destinings. And art was called simply techne, right? Same word for technology. It was a single manifold revealing. It was pious, promos, yielding to the holding sway in the safekeeping of truth. The arts were not derived from the artistic. Artworks were not enjoyed aesthetically. Art was not a sector of cultural activity. I mean, it was much more just a part of the culture, a part of the society. It wasn't. You didn't have to go down to the design district or to the museum district, or it wasn't just like these specific places that it was something that was more just sort of ingrained and entwined into the tapestry of life. That there was a piety towards being, a piety towards the things that we create, the things that we participate in, societal structures, that there was an art to them. There was a poetry to them. There was a truth to them, and that people, respected them accordingly and comported themselves accordingly. If you go to the next page, 340, he quotes these lines again from Hölderlin, the German poet. But where danger is, grows the saving power also. Says to us, poetically, man dwells on this earth. The poetical brings the true into the splendor of what Plato in the Phaedrus calls to ekphenosteton, that which shines forth most purely. The poetical thoroughly pervades every art, ever revealing of essential unfolding into the beautiful. And if you drop down a paragraph, he says, whether art may be granted this highest possibility of its essence in the midst of the extreme danger, no one can tell, of the world of the technical rationality, of the world saturated with modern technology. He says, yet we can be astounded, right? We can do that. We have that possibility. We can, thalmazan, the ancient, Greek word for wonderment. We can be astounded. We can be in awe. We can cultivate that possibility. Not just like an idle curiosity, not just the, oh wow, that's really cool, but this truly profound way of allowing the world phenomena to just leave us there amazed, like we're enraptured by what it is that we see, that what we experience, what we hear, right, what we feel, that those things matter, that those aren't just a nice little thing here and there, but it might be the very origin of the possibility of a possible way of tapping into the salvific, the aspect of the phenomenon of modern technology which might save us. He says, before what? Before this other possibility, that the frenziedness of technology may entrench itself everywhere to such an extent that someday, throughout everything technological, the essence of technology may unfold essentially in the appropriative event of truth. And if we drop down another paragraph, he says, such a realm is art. But certainly only if reflection upon art for its part does not shut its eyes to the constellation of truth concerning that which we are questioning. And then he ends this by saying, for questioning is the piety of thought. Meaning we can return to, or just turn to, how it is that we should view art, or are capable of viewing art. If we use that same sort of skill set, same sort of type of comportment, the same sort of attitude, the same sort of openness and piety in which the engagement that we have of things which show us the beautiful, we can take that to modern technology. That they're both poetic, they're both technes. They both have the capacity to show and reveal the truth to us, and then we can be moved by it. We can be changed by it. We can practice our freedom, thus, in following the trace of what it is that they show us, what it is that they hide within themselves. And this is the way forward. This is the way that allows us not to be unfree in our relationship to technology, to be people who are just ultimately ones who think that they're using technology, but that ultimately being used by it. And all the various institutions and practices today that are just so mindless, in their use, in their being used by it. Being sold things, being sold a way of life, being sold a value system, being sold on what we are told is good and beneficial and profitable, but truly, if this course has taught us anything, perhaps is not in our best interests, not in the best interests of ourselves, of others, of the world. We'll leave Heidegger there for now. I'm going to do another video we're gonna look at a couple of really short pieces by Audre Lorde, which is taking this attitude about art and about poetry and sort of moving it into the social and political world, so that this isn't maybe something that we just has to sort of stay in our own thinking, but can then be how we're actually going to engage others and try to affect real change. So, hope that was helpful. So until then, keep reading, keep thinking. I'll see you soon.